So we are approaching to the first panel for the day. We're going to talk about AI innovation, ethics and diversity, the same topic that we had during the roundtables. But this time we will have help with three women, really passionate. Actually, when I start looking at them in the LinkedIn, the three of them mention passion and love about technology, about diversity. So it's actually really interesting. We have Elena, I hope I said it right, Kell. She's worked in Telia as an AI Center of Excellence Innovation and Change Manager at Telia company. We have Katarina Hansson. She's a retail industry lead in Teradata, and she called herself the analytical translator. I love that. She should explain a little bit more what she means. And then we have Metsäranta. She's from Solita. She's a business strategist, and her heart beats for modern technology that enables a better world. So I welcome these three women on stage, I hope. Otherwise, it would be so awesome. Thank you. Please.
Come down. Thanks.
Where's Katarina?
Here. Getting mic'd up.
And actually, I asked Linda to help me here too. So Linda, please. Thank you. You can see, I can stand. Actually, it's not like I'm growing up more, but you never know. Perfect, thank you to help me. If you have any questions during the panel, there's in the app, you will find something called Questions to the Panel, I think. And Linda will read them. So if you have any questions, just, this is a panel. So this is here, but it's for you too. So if you have any questions on the fly, just ask them. And the first question I want to ask you is, how do we increase diversity in data and AI? The how.
I could start,
yes,
if I may. So I think I'm really lucky today to have two hats on me. So it's not only from Telia perspective and how we work with ethics and innovation in Telia, but also as an ambassador for Women in AI, where the sort of mission of our network is to bridge the gap from the 20-ish% of women we have now in AI to much bigger. So, and from this perspective, from Women in AI perspective, what we do is that we have a network of over 3,000 women in 90 different countries, and we focus on sort of bringing up more role models and mentors and researchers and tech representatives into one community for sharing, for kind of supporting each other, for giving each other opportunities and exposure in this field. So that is one way, in my opinion, that how we can really raise the diversity through these activities. And also, I think from the Telia perspective, we really recognize the problem, and I think we do a lot of activities with our global head of diversity, who is sitting right there. We have the role model day. We have where we bring a lot of mentors into Telia and a lot of girls to kind of, show them what their career paths are, and such activities as well.
Perfect. Anna.
Well, you start with the million-dollar question of how. That's what we've all been wondering about. I sort of initially, when I was a younger woman, I don't identify as an old woman now, but when I was younger.
Younger today.
Yes. I was sort of against gender quotas, and I thought, well, that's the wrong way to do this, and it should be about the competence and all that. So I was totally buying into the sort of patriarchy way of thinking about things. Now, with a couple more years of wisdom with me, I think that that's the only way. And so the only way is to make dramatic decisions, make dramatic choices, to say, actually, these leadership boards or these AI research and development groups, they should be 50-50. Like, we can start with a quota of 40, but ultimately they should be 50-50, because that's the population of the world, that's the population of students in universities. The talent is there. But the ongoing sort of cultural structures, cultural norms, the societal way of thinking about STEM and thinking about AI and data and technology is still very much directed towards men. And a lot of that is in the conscious world, but an even bigger part is in the subconscious world. And that's what we aim to change by introducing these quotas. So we're enforcing the change so that it becomes the norm. So I think that's the simple answer.
Katarina, you're a little bit wiser than the rest of us.
No, and I try to take a different kind of angle. Another thing with change, and because this is also change management, diversity, it doesn't happen overnight. And I'm middle-aged, so I have been working a lot of years. And for many years, that was not a question, because I was working in companies where diversity was on the agenda. So it was when I started working in the IT space, when I realized that I'm one of very many men around me. So I started understanding that diversity is important. But on the other hand, I'm also a guest lecturer at the university. And when we're talking about data analytics, it seems like everyone is talking about data science. But the thing is also, part of that is also all the business managers. And as a guest lecturer at the university for business, students on a master level, I have educated some 1,000 students in data science from a business perspective. The sad thing is that there is equal in the audience, but the most interest, the spark in the eye, I get from the guys. And I don't know why. But the very few in the room that is women that shows an interest, I have decided to be a mentor. So I have a lot of young women out there in the 20s that I'm actually a mentor to. And it doesn't mean that everyone should be a mentor, but I think that if we start thinking about our part of the change management, I think that it will go slowly, but things will happen. So take your own part of change management. As a mother, as a colleague or inspiration or whatever, it starts with ourselves.
Actually, I have a question to you regarding what Telia is doing. Do you have a budget, dedicated money to work with diversity? Or everybody's doing this for... It was a tricky question. I feel like it's like... Okay,
it's a very good question. I think we have some resources that we dedicate to that, definitely. And it is still a big challenge to bring it to the level where it becomes, as you say, systematic change, right? So where we review that, but again, this is a work in progress. So it is now, I think, at our executive management table to decide how to move forward. So in different ways, we try to bring it higher and higher on the agenda.
That's interesting. I have another question regarding, when we talk about diversity and the bias of data and what happened, when the history that we are seeing, the data we had in the past is actually not giving us the future we want. How do you think we can address this kind of, deal with the data biases in legacy? Can we call it legacy? Or what
I think it is legacy. If I can start by answering that, I don't think, again, that there is a simple answer to this. If it was simple, we would have solved it already. But I think, in fact, the answer is diversity and inclusion, because when we have these... there's a term called WEIRD. Who here knows what WEIRD means? It's an acronym. It stands for Western, Educated, Industrialized, Rich, and Democratic. This is the group of people that build these solutions, and this is the people for whom the solutions are being built. When we break out of that weird bubble, then we start to question the data, actually, because it's not the algorithm that's biased, right? It's never the algorithm. The algorithm does not have ethical values. It doesn't know what bias is. It's math and statistics. It's the people who choose the data to train the algorithm with. And we do have all these subconscious biases, every one of us does, and we look at the world from our own perspective. So if nobody's challenging that perspective, then we also look at the data from our own perspective. And if we happen to be in this weird bubble, and particularly if we happen to be white, Caucasian, middle-aged male, that's the world that we see. And that's, for example, why the facial recognition algorithms are 99% accurate for white Caucasian males and 35% accurate for black women. That's why it happens, because there were no black women developing these, and it wasn't represented in the data. So when you're training an algorithm, you must understand that the data set has to equally represent the different possibilities that there are. It doesn't work with a data set that's 90% white Caucasian male and 10% all the minorities. It's not going to train the algorithm well enough to identify the others. So the first question is, how do we even become aware of that? We become aware of that by having a diverse team of people building these solutions.
Totally agree. Yeah. I think that's the only way to do it.
But it's also a little bit interesting discussing that maybe, you know, in the way that you see the algorithm at the basis, not only the team, but the fact is that the data is that this is it. You know, at some point there was only male, white, and you know, when you try to, it's like when you talk about innovation, you need new data to create innovation. I think it's a little bit the same. You know, how do you create models that doesn't have the data you're actually supposed to have to, you know, change the way, like in recruiting processes, for example. You know, you have HR helping, you know, like this algorithm helping HR, they're not helping at all, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's a really risky area, actually. At the moment, I think we've seen some horrendous examples of how this goes wrong.
But I could just sort of add one sort of stats that I've seen by Gartner, that I think by 2022, 85% of the algorithms would have incorrect outcomes because of bias in algorithm and data sets and sort of in the way the team structure. And that's a you know, if we turn it around and say, you know, we all have seen so many examples of bias. Have we ever seen an example that is an algorithm bias towards a white male? Has anyone seen such example? And you know, if we just continue through this path, and when we reach those 85%, I mean, it's pretty scary.
Yeah. If I can say one more thing about that, I feel like there's some light at the end of the tunnel, because also the problem can become the solution. AI can become the solution. There's a fantastic example called Iris AI, yes, which is a solution that helps the academic field to drop the bias. The academic field is inherently deeply biased. The same publications are quoted over and over and over and over again. And this Iris AI solution actually helps to drop that bias by sort of more evenly scouring the field of academic research and identifying where a piece of research has been overemphasized, and sort of dropping that emphasis. So sometimes we can maybe actually learn to use AI technologies to identify the biases that us humans cannot identify.
You know about that one? I should Google it afterwards.
Yes, I recommend it.
Talking about a little bit of ethics, it's a topic that really is really warming my heart, because often we forget, you know, what we do, what the numbers are, the zeros and ones in the database, what they are. How do you think about, you know, how ethics should be part of the AI, or how do you see, you know, companies, are you taking, you know, that in consideration, for example, from Telia?
Yes, so about a year ago we have created a framework, what we call Principles for Trusted and Ethical AI in Telia. So we have sort of used the input that was out there from the EU Commission and so on, and we created that framework, which is quite high level. And but that gave us some sort of reference point to see how we move forward in this. And then we have Elena there, maybe we'll talk a bit more about that, but we have partnered with AI Sustainability Center, who helps us sort of in practice see how we do that on certain use cases. And in parallel, we'll also, and that's the work that I'm leading, is seeing how we can turn all of that together for a wider guidance for the organization and for our further product development. So it is very interesting, because the deeper you kind of go into that, the bigger it becomes, and it is super complex. And I think we really need to have people of different disciplines and academics and tech and others coming together to address certain questions on a continuous basis. So we do not see it in any way that we could be, you know, done with this ever. It will always have to be renewed and sort of worked on.
I totally agree. I think this with ethics is really hard, because ethics for me is something else for you, for example. And I was heavily involved with the GDPR compliance. And one part of that, which was something that I was really reflecting on, was that even though you can do a lot with data, as long as you're compliant, there's a completely different thing if you should be doing it.
Yes.
So the ethics, for me, from my perspective, should be very closely linked to your business model, to understand your customer. What is your standpoint on the market? If you don't have that understanding how ethics should be applied, it's really hard, because then you could be sidetracked. But another, because when I do this lecturing, I always finish with ethics. Just because you can do it doesn't mean that you should be doing it.
That's correct.
And just imagine 1,000 students, and one question that I'm asking them is that, have you ever read the legal agreement that you signed off, for example, for Google, Facebook, Twitter, None. 0. 1,000 students. And when talking about ethics, I think there is also a shift in where the boundaries, because ethics is about boundaries. And I think this with data analytics, ethics, and boundaries is shifting. So it starts floating a bit. But I think there's a generation part.
There's a new concept coming in called explainable AI, XAI. What do you think about this? It's a commercial, thing that...
It's not just a commercial thing. It's real. There are real open source algorithms that can attempt to explain how a deep neural network works. It is an attempt, and I don't really yet know if that's going to solve the problem. Deep neural networks are inherently troublesome because they don't think like humans think, so we cannot understand the reasoning that happens. There's no reasoning, there's mathematical operations happening in the nodes of the neural network. And the explainable AI components can plug into a neural network and try to pick out some of the most explaining factors. And that's a really good start, and I think we're starting to see more and more of them in production. But in some industries, like healthcare, for example, that's still an issue. We can't really necessarily do that. But at least we're trying to solve that problem, so I think that's a good start. And also, the thing about ethics, of course, is the main question always to do with ethics is who decides, whose ethics, because yours are different to mine, to yours. The European, Western, the weird ethics are different from, for example, the Chinese ethics. Like how China chooses to use facial recognition algorithms. We wouldn't accept it here in Europe. But for them, it's ethical. So it's not AI that's ethical. It's whoever is deploying AI. And I agree with you there that it has to be a process, and there have to be tools and frameworks. And it's an ongoing process that we do. Even after it goes into production, we have to keep doing the evaluation.
But I think, if I may, I just want to connect it then back to diversity, because we, when we get to that point, it is so important that we talk diversity not only in development teams, but also when you say, who is taking the decision or who decides what ethical. And that's a huge challenge. How do we do that? So there have been some examples from Google, for example, that assembled the AI ethics board, which I thought was a good idea, and they kind of shut it down after a week of existence because they had one person there who had very questionable, moral, so to say, was anti-LGBTQ spokesperson for parliament or something. And they shut it down because they faced a huge resistance from their employees, and they just failed in that. So they said,
what was the topic? Especially if somebody doesn't know what Google did. What was it they did?
They tried to assemble ethics board, AI ethics board. So a sort of a board or a committee that would decide when it's escalated, from what I understand, that what is ethical, what is not. And there were other examples where such boards were hugely male and white dominated, with very few women and no people of color. So again, no easy question, but those things that we, in the company should start thinking about. Who will be ultimately also deciding?
Well, that's a good. You have a question from the audience, I see.
Yes, we have a question. So how can you improve diversity, for example, gender, if management is not diverse and might not even be aware of the issue?
Excellent question.
Good luck with that question.
Excellent question. I can tell you how I would approach that, and I actually probably will with my current employer, because we have a gender imbalance in our senior management team. I like facts. I like data, I like numbers, and there is actually a respectable amount of research on the market by the likes of McKinsey and Gartner and all these big names. Harvard Business Review has a fantastic article on the business benefits of diversity, folks. It makes for better business. It makes for better turnover, better profit, better growth. That's a good place to start when you give these kind of management teams the numbers. This is what you can achieve by increasing diversity. It's not going to solve the problem, but it's a start.
I would say that this is a really big problem. And it's not solved by, it's very good to tell the management that you're on the wrong track. But I think that it's encouraged women. As a woman, the hardest thing that I've been facing in my career is not the men around me, it's the women around me. And I think that of course you should demand to have a seat, to be heard and so forth, but I also think that to encourage other women to support, promote. I've been in a situation where one of my female colleagues, she was promoted, and all the guys was talking badly about her. And then I said, like, honestly, you have to stop, because she's super brilliant. She is the best person for that job. So it's encourage and promote and really stand up for other women. And I think that we, of course, should do as you say, but I also think that we should support each other.
That's a good point. Elena?
And I would just also add, when you fix that problem, whoever is asking that question, then challenge it once again, because very often it seems to be that some management teams are quite happy with 50-50, and then when you start looking into who's actually having which roles, and then you have women who are head of HR, comms, admin, legal, and the male manager is pretty happy about it. Look at this, we have the diversity, and we have to remind ourselves and remember that it is about distribution of power and how it's distributed in that team versus just the numbers.
Absolutely correct.
Any other question from the audience?
Yes,
I can go.
Quite a few questions coming in. That's very appreciated. So about gender quotas. So does this explicitly say, for example, in job ads? So if you're looking to recruit more females, can you say that in an ad? Would you? And what does that mean? Do we close the door for talented men? Really hard one.
Excellent questions. Love it.
I would say that, I don't think it's it's really, because that is also a moral thing. I wouldn't say that, yes, close the door for the talent guys, because as a woman, I would like to have the job because I'm the best one, not because I'm a woman. So it's a balance, even though I think that we need to force the change, but I don't want to be pointed out just because I'm a woman. And so it is both yes and no, I would say.
I think the thing about, sorry.
Yeah, no.
The thing about job ads is that you actually have to pay attention to how the job ad is worded. What are you looking for? What are your requirements? Because inherently, we were talking about this in our table earlier, inherently women tend to, and this is a massive overgeneralization, but bear with me, women tend to underestimate their ability and their experience. Men tend to overestimate their ability and their experience. So if we have a job ad that's worded in a very traditionally masculine way, and it can be very subconscious, and we have a very strict list of requirements, you must have this and that and the other, women are more likely to say, well, I'm a little bit short of the requirements, I shouldn't apply because I'm not going to get it anyway. And men will be like, well, I don't even have half of that. I'll just apply anyway. We'll see. Yeah. So the point here with the job ads is not to close the door on anyone. It's to open the door for everyone, not just for the white males. It's to write the ad in such a way that it encourages women and all sorts of minorities to apply as well. And as part of the job ad, I think it's very well in place to say that as a company, we pay attention to diversity and inclusion, and we have targets. But of course, you're not going to close the door on anyone in particular for any particular position. It's about inviting all the good applications that you can.
Elena, do you have any input you want to?
No, I completely agree.
Actually, we were talking, and my team is 50-50. I have actually data scientists and data analysts, and we was talking. Somebody asked me, "Wow, how you make it happen?" And after a lot of thinking, I realized that's the way I write the ad. It was the only way for me to realize that the way I write it made female. I had a lot of female candidates applying for the first time ever in the company, and the only difference that I wrote the ad, and normally it's the guy writing the ad. So you have a point that I think so. I don't know. That's my theory.
Well, there's research on that. Again, I don't remember the source of this, but I just read recently somewhere that an experiment was done where a job ad for a certain kind of a position was the tone of the language was changed a little bit to be sort of more inclusive and a bit warmer in tone. And it invited 12% more female applicants. So it can just be that simple. It's a really simple, practical thing to do.
More questions for the audience?
Yes, an easier one. Very short. Recommendations on AI innovation. Books to read on AI innovation. If you have something top of mind, you can drop it, or we can publish in the app after.
I can think about it and recommend someone in the app. Yeah.
I have a last question. Somebody was talking about you need to have this diversity to create innovation. But can a team that is the same like people create innovation as well? Like do you need diversity to innovate? I'm challenging you. It's like, do you really need it?
I can start, and I would say that I truly believe that you need diversity for innovation. Again, if you see innovation as something that is long-term, that is needed for your organization and sort of in a sustainable way, I mean, I might think that a team who is completely homogeneous could probably come up with something. But again, the value of that in the end, I was questioned. And I would question that as a customer. I would question that as a fellow employee.
I would say any kind of development needs diversity, and I think that I've been running a startup, and without thinking about diversity, but the best ideas came with the young people in the team, with me, with experience, other male with experience, and I think that the good ideas comes from different kind of thinking and looking at the same problem. And I think that diversity is important.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's a lot less probability of groupthink happening when you have more diverse viewpoints in the team. You're going to challenge things more, and you're not just going to sort of, because the groupthink phenomenon just means that people actually overemphasize their personal opinions if the group agrees with them. Then you kind of there's this swell-up impact where your original opinion is multiplied by the group agreeing with you. So it really helps to have these different viewpoints that will ask, well, hold on, why? That's the most important question. Why?
I'm in time. I'm sorry, 1 minute over. Any more questions? No, then we're done. Thank you. She's like, people are hungry.
We didn't have time to answer all the questions in the panel question in the app, but that's a good conversation starter for lunch later on.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you.